The lantern light flickered against the rough-hewn beams of the barn, casting long shadows over Hannah's trembling hands. She knew she shouldn't be here. The ordnung was clear, and her father's word was law. But when she heard the soft crunch of boots on the straw, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. He was leaving tomorrow. The English world was calling him, promising freedom and bright lights. Hannah clutched the small, embroidered handkerchief in her pocket, her only gift to him. If she stepped out of the shadows now, she risked her soul. If she stayed hidden, she risked breaking her heart forever. The morning mist clung to the valleys of Holmes County, like a soft, white quilt that God hadn't quite pulled back yet. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning where the air tasted crisp, like biting into a fresh winesap apple. Inside the Yoder farmhouse, the wood stove was already roaring, popping and hissing as it fought back the autumn chill. Hannah Yoder stood by the kitchen window, her hands deep in warm, soapy water. She was 19, with eyes the color of the flax fields in bloom, and a spirit that was usually as quiet as the dawn. But today, her thoughts were loud. Today was market day. And market day meant seeing him. Hannah had among him, called out gently from the pantry, her voice tired but kind. Don't daydream the morning away. The bread needs kneading, and your dad wants the apple butter jars. Labeled before noon. Hannah nodded, wiping her hands on her apron, quickly tucking a stray strand of hair back under her white prayer cap. She moved to the large oak table, her knuckles pressing rhythmically into the dough. Push, turn, fold, push, turn, fold. It was a rhythm she had known since she was tall enough to stand on a stool, but her mind wasn't on the yeast or the flour. It was on Levi Troya. Levi was different. While the other boys in their church district were content with the plow and the milking barn, Levi always looked at the horizon. He walked with a stride that was a little too long, and he asked questions during family gatherings that made the elders stroke their beards in silence. Later that morning, the buggy wheels crunched over the gravel as Hannah and her father, Bishop Amos Yoder, made their way into town. The buggy rocked gently, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse acting as a familiar lullaby. Bishop Amos was a stern man, a man of few words and deep convictions. He loved his daughter, but he loved the law of the church more. The English world is creeping closer, Hannah, Amos said, looking at a passing car with a frown. We must keep our fences strong. Hannah only nodded, keeping her eyes on the dashboard. They arrived at the auction grounds, a bustling sea of black hats and colorful bonnets. And there he was. Levi Troyer was unloading pumpkins from a flatbed wagon. He wore his straw hat tipped slightly back, revealing a tan that came from hard work under the summer sun. He looked up, and for a terrifying, beautiful second, his eyes locked with Hannah's. He didn't smile. That would have been too bold with her father, right there, but his gaze held a warmth that made Hannah's cheeks burn. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. It was a silent language they had built over 3 years of stolen glances across church benches and singing circles. A language that said, I see you. I am still here. November arrived with a bite of frost, turning the corn stalks brown and brittle. The community was busy with the harvest cleanup, preparing for the long Ohio winter. It was during a corn-husking frolic at the Miller farm that the silence between them was finally broken. The barn was filled with laughter and the rustling of dry husks. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the young people seated on hay bales. It was a time of supervised socialization, a rare moment of freedom. Hannah found herself near the back, stacking the husked corn into crates. That's a heavy crate for one person, a voice said softly. Hannah didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The deep, steady timbre of Levi's voice vibrated through her. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. Levi stepped into the dim light, picking up the crate with ease. I can manage, Levi, she whispered, looking around to ensure no one was watching too closely. Her father was in the main house, drinking coffee with the other men, but eyes were everywhere in a small community. I know you can, Levi said, placing the crate down. He didn't move away. He stood close enough that she could smell the scent of pine shavings and clean laundry soap on his coat. But you shouldn't have to carry everything alone. Hannah, the double meaning hung in the air. "I hear you are going," Hannah said, the words hurting her throat as she spoke them. "They say you are taking the bus to Indiana, to work in an English factory." Livy looked down at his boots, then back at her. His expression was pained. "I have to know, Hannah. I have to see what is out there. I cannot commit to the church, to the Ordnung, until I know for sure that my heart is here." "And if your heart isn't here," she asked, her voice trembling, "then I won't come back," he said simply. "But, ... He hesitated, reaching out as if to touch her hand, then pulling back at the last second. "There is one thing that pulls me back. One thing that makes me want to stay." Hannah looked up at him, her blue eyes wide. "What is it?" Levi lowered his voice to a whisper, leaning in. "You know what it is, Hannah. It has always been you." The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Before she could respond, a burst of laughter from the group startled them. Levi took a step back, tipping his hat. "I leave in 2 days. I will leave a letter in the old oak tree by the creek." Read it. And then, just like that, he melted back into the shadows of the barn. The next 2 days passed in a blur of anxiety. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. Hannah felt as though she was carrying a heavy stone in her chest. On the morning of Leva's departure, under the guise of gathering kindling, she ran to the creek that bordered their property. The old oak tree stood like a sentinel, its roots twisting into the icy water. Hannah reached into the hollow of the trunk, her fingers brushing against rough bark until they touched paper. She pulled it out, a folded piece of lined notebook paper. She didn't dare read it there. She tucked it into the bodice of her dress, right against her heart, and hurried back to the house. She waited until nightfall, until the house was silent and the only light came from the moon filtering through her bedroom window. She unfolded the paper. "Dearest Hannah," it read, "I am going to find myself, but I fear I will only find that I am missing you. Do not wait for me if it causes you pain. But if you can, give me 1 year. Look at the moon on the 1st of every month, and know I am looking at it too. Yours, Levi." She pressed the letter to her lips, a single tear staining the ink. She hid the letter inside her Bible, between the pages of the Song of Solomon. It was the safest place she knew, but secrets in a farmhouse are hard to keep. 2 weeks later, Bishop Amos called Hannah into the sitting room. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. Her mother sat in the corner, weeping silently into her apron. On the table lay the family Bible. "Open, Hannah," her father said, his voice low and shaking with restrained emotion. "I went to prepare the reading for Sunday, and I found this." He pointed to Levy's letter. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't speak. She couldn't lie. "Dead," she whispered. "He is gone, Hannah." Amos's voice rose, cracking like a whip. "He is gone to the English world. He is not baptized. He is not one of us right now. And you are the bishop's daughter. You are courting danger. You are courting a yoke that is unequally tired." "I love him," Hannah said. The words, small but firm. It was the first time she had ever defied her father. Amos looked at her with a mixture of anger and profound sadness. "Love does not plow the fields. Love does not keep the commandments. Obedience does. You will burn this letter, and you will not speak his name in this house again. Silas Miller has asked to drive you home from the singing next Sunday. You will say yes." Winter descended on Holmes County with a vengeance. The snow piled high against the fences, and the wind howled through the eaves of the house. For Hannah, the cold was inside as well as outside. She burned the letter, watching the paper curl and turn to ash in the wood stove, but the words were branded on her memory. She did as she was told. She allowed Silas Miller to drive her home. Silas was a good man. It was steady baptized, and owned a share of his father's dairy farm. He spoke of milk prices and the weather. He never asked about her dreams. He never looked at the horizon. Months dragged on. Rumors trickled back into the community, as they always did. Someone had seen Levi in a town near Cleveland. Someone said he was driving a truck. Someone said he was wearing English clothes, blue jeans, and a button-down shirt with no sound. Every time Hannah heard these whispers, a piece of her hope died. He was becoming one of them. The gap between them was widening into a canyon. Spring arrived, bringing mud and new calves, but no Levi. It had been 6 months. Hannah stood on the porch one evening, watching the full moon rise over the barn. "Look at the moon," he had said. She squeezed her eyes shut. Was he looking, or had he forgotten the girl in the bonnet for the girls with painted faces and curled hair? One evening in May, Silas sat in the parlor with her parents. He was asking for permission to marry Hannah in the fall. Hannah sat in the kitchen, listening. She felt like a spectator in her own life. Her father was pleased. Her mother looked relieved. Hannah, her father, called her in. "Silas has a question for you." Silas stood up, his hat in his hands. He looked nervous but hopeful. "Hannah, I have the house ready. I would be honored if you would be my wife." Hannah looked at her father's expectant face. She looked at her mother's tired eyes. She looked at Silas, who was safe and kind. She took a breath to say yes. It was the sensible thing. The right thing. Double quotes she started. But the word stuck. A sudden, fierce panic seized her chest. If she said yes, the door to the other life, the life with Levi, would slam shut forever. "I need time," she blurted out. The room went silent. Silas's face fell. Her father's brows drew together. "Time?" Amos asked sternly. "Silas has waited all winter." "Ihust, I need until the harvest," Hannah said, her voice trembling. "Please, just until the harvest." The summer was agonizing. Hannah worked harder than she ever had, tending the massive vegetable gardens, canning hundreds of jars of tomatoes and peas. She prayed constantly, asking God to take the longing away, to make her heart content with Silas. But the silence remained. Then came September. The year was up. It was a Sunday, shortly after the church service held at the Yoder farm. The benches were being loaded back into the bench wagon. The women were washing dishes in the summer kitchen. Hannah was carrying a stack of plates when she heard the dogs barking. A black buggy was coming down the lane, but it wasn't a local buggy. The horse was trotting fast. As it pulled up to the gate, the dust settled, and a man stepped out. He was wearing plain clothes, a black vest, black trousers, a white shirt, a broad-brimmed straw hat, but he was thinner than before, his face more angular, his eyes older. It was Levi. The chatter in the yard stopped. Everyone watched. Levi didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight toward Bishop Amos, who was standing by the barn. Hannah set the plates down, her hands shaking so hard she feared she would break them. She walked out onto the porch. Levi took off his hat. He lowered his head in front of the bishop. "I have come home," Levi said. His voice was raspy, filled with emotion. "I have seen the world, Bishop. I have worked in their factories and driven their cars. It is loud. It is lonely. There is no peace there." Amos crossed his arms. "You left us, Levi. You turned your back." "I did," Levi admitted, "and I was wrong. I learned that a man can travel the whole world and find nothing if he leaves his soul behind. I want to make confession. I want to be baptized. I want to be part of the job." Amos stared at him for a long, agonizing minute. The Amish way was one of forgiveness, but it was not one of easy trust. Finally, Amos nodded slowly. "The church will hear you next Sunday. If your repentance is true, the door is open." Levi let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a year. It turned then, searching the crowd. His eyes found Hannah on the porch. He didn't smile, but the look he gave her was intense, burning with a question. Hannah didn't wait. She didn't care about the staring neighbors or her stunned mother. She walked down the porch steps, across the grass, and stopped 5 feet from him. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you," Levi said softly, his eyes watering. "I told you I would only stay away if my heart wasn't here." "My heart never left this farm, Hannah." The camera of our mind's eye pans forward now, skipping over the seasons of life. We see a wedding in November. Not long after that return, with celery stalks in vases, and a table groaning with roast chicken and mashed potatoes, we see Hannah in her black wedding dress, her face radiant. We move forward 10 years. The farmhouse has an addition built on the side. There are children running through the tall grass tray of Tim, barefoot and laughing. Hannah sits on the porch swing, snapping beans into a metal bowl. She is older now, small lines of laughter etched around her eyes. The screen door opens, and Levi steps out. He has a beard now, full and dark, the mark of a married Amish man. He sits beside her, the wood of the swing groaning slightly under his weight. He doesn't say a word. He just reaches over and takes a handful of beans, helping her snap them. Snap, snap. The rhythm of their life together. Hannah looks at him. She thinks of the letter in the tree. She thinks of the year of silence. She thinks of Silas, who eventually found a lovely wife in the next district. The corn looks good this year, Livy says, looking out over the fields that turn gold in the setting sun. It does, Hannah replies. She rests her head for just a moment on his shoulder, a rare display of affection. It was worth the wait, Levi. He covers her hand with his rough, calloused palm warm against her skin. Yeah, he says softly, it is good to be home. The sun dips below the hills of Holmes County, bathing the farm in a twilight purple. The buggies pass on the road, their lanterns flickering like fireflies. Peace has returned to the valley, and in the quiet of the farmhouse, love, tested and tried, remains the strongest foundation of all.